pleasure to introduce Peter York. We're very fortunate to have him here on campus today. And Peter is a very senior veteran marketing and communications executive. He spent a lot of time in the industry working with companies like Citi, iFlex, and then Oracle as VP of Marketing and Communications. And currently he has a very strong consulting practice with many companies in the area of content marketing and executing content marketing programs. So this is very much related to all the things that we've been talking about over the last few days. Communication, communicating strategy, creating the right content, executing those programs. So love to hear from Peter his insights and experience. So without further ado, I just got the mic for the last sentence of this introduction. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Peter and invite him. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thanks. Thank you. Conversation should go, it's a kind of a two-way process. So in terms of just understanding from you what your outlook on content is, and how a content program is run, and a few kind of things in that direction. So before anything else, I just thought I'll give you a little bit of insight into what I've been doing. I've spent probably about 18-20 years in the tech industry, TCS, Wipro, iFlex, Oracle, and that kind of thing, where I spent a lot of time kind of developing content and running content programs. Of course, I have to confess that about half of the time that I spent in this industry, I didn't know that I was like a content marketer. Okay, because this term is kind of a relatively recent term. But the other half is when I realized that I'm part of this group of people who call themselves content marketers. I remember my early days in TCS, way back in 1990 it was, when I walked into the company new. It was somewhere in the middle of May, and these guys kind of, as part of the general introduction, they take you around and kind of introduce you to various people. And this was Air India building, 11th floor in Mumbai, prime real estate, Nariman Point, etc. And they took me into this room, which was a fairly largish room, where there were a bunch of people who were sitting there and hammering away at something. So the gentleman who was introducing me said, this is a fairly important place to be, and you kind of got to develop some good relations with these people. So I was a little curious, and I turned and said, why, what do these guys do? And there was an entire room of people who were at typewriters. Okay, they were actually typing away, and they call this place the typing pool. Okay. I got to realize later that if ever you wanted to send a memo to Mr. F.C. Kohli or whatever it is, you have to come here, be nice to one of these guys, and the guy will actually type a memo for you. You would actually handwrite it, give it to him. He'll actually type it for you, and then you could actually sign it, and it will go inside for whatever you wanted to ask for. Things have changed dramatically since then. I mean, there is no longer typing pool and secretaries and all this kind of stuff. So the way in which the whole landscape of marketing has changed itself in the last 30 or 35 years is rather intriguing. And the other force that is kind of applying or is kind of getting applied in this whole direction is there's a whole lot of democratization of the way in which content and data is consumed, is developed, and is kind of is written. So in those days, I remember, if there was a crisis or if there was a semblance of a crisis, you had about 35 phone numbers that you would actually call, and you would tell these guys, look, you would try to preempt it, you try to move it from page 1 to page 12, you try to do some good PR effort over there and kind of get things going. Today the whole paradigm has changed. It's no longer a matter of trying to muzzle the conversation or trying to kind of control the conversation. The best you can do is actually to kind of participate, empathize, apologize if required, and get going with what you have to do. So the whole outlook in terms of how content is actually created has completely changed, because it's no longer them versus us, it's no longer media versus public. Today the public itself is the media, and we are using a whole lot of channels on which we communicate. Therefore it becomes all the more essential and all the more necessary for us to kind of put out content that becomes meaningful not just to somebody else out there but to ourselves itself. And that actually has become the whole challenge and the charm of the whole content marketing industry. So I was reading about this article which appeared in the press maybe a couple of years back or some time, when a bunch of guys actually went out, they were part of a group very similar to the kind of group that's here. And they went out, they wanted to meet up, for a coffee. So they all kind of congregated in Coffee Day in Chennai. They sat down and kind of, some of them ordered coffee, some of them just didn't order anything, and it was, about a 1 hour meeting. And at the end of that 1.5 hour meeting, as they were leaving and they wanted to pay the bill, the Coffee Day guy, the manager, walked up and said, "Sir, you got to pay this bill, but you also got to pay a cover charge." So the guys turned around and said, "Cover charge in a Coffee Day? Normally nobody charges, there's no cover charge in a Coffee Day." So he said, "See, 40 of you came or 30 of you came, you sat down here, only 10 guys had coffee, the other 20 just warmed the seats and went off. That is an opportunity loss for me, because actually, I could have had other customers coming in and sitting down over here." So these guys had a bit of an argument with that chap, and finally, at the end they said, "Okay, forget it, pay the cover charge." They paid whatever it was, $1,500 or whatever the money was, and they walked off. But one of the guys was just not at rest with this whole thing. So he decided to kind of, post something on Facebook. And he put up a thing and said, has any of you heard of this cover charge in a Coffee Day? I haven't heard of it, but I was forced to kind of pay this $1,500 or whatever, and I think it's completely outrageous. 6 o'clock in the evening or 6:30 in the evening, put up the post over there, and he kind of just left the conversation. The conversation started building up. So people started saying, either empathizing with him, justifying, arguing, whatever it was. And this whole thing just went on the whole night. In fact, interestingly, by the time the conversation went on to the morning, there were people commenting about the quality of coffee at Coffee Day versus barista, which was completely irrelevant to the original conversation, that how it started. But this whole thing just went on and on and on. And ultimately the next morning at 10 o'clock in the morning, the Coffee Day guys actually jumped onto the scene and started putting out apologies. So that was like almost about, 15 hours, 16 hours after the original post came out. The game has completely changed. So it's not about, reaching out in that 9 to 5 slot that we are all very used to reaching out. Today it's a 24/7 kind of a thing that we need to be aware of. So it's not just about, so reputation can be built in a matter of 12 hours while you're in bed, okay? That's really what it is. And the whole thing, again, completely hinges on content. If you look at our own life and the way in which we behave, everything is kind of dependent on our consumption of content. The products we buy, the places we go to. So today, before you go to a restaurant, you do big research. When I was young, I didn't research anything. My father said, "Let's go out for a meal." He chose a restaurant, we walked in, we went there and came. Today we are looking at ratings and how many stars are there in Zomato. We are checking to see whether the order can be delivered in under 45 minutes on a Swiggy. We are looking at comments on Facebook. We are kind of, in a sense, in a point where we are kind of, photographing the food we are eating and putting it out there, and people are liking it or commenting on it and doing all kinds of things. We are kind of become narcissistic in a manner where we are kind of trying to, pamper our own egos and go on from there. But the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of what we do, a lot of what we consume and communicate, everything kind of relates around content. But traditionally, the whole effort has been not so much to focus on the content creation, but to focus on the content dissemination. And I think that whole thing is kind of changing, and that is what has to be recognized. So people today believe that it's not about the creation of the content. For a long time that's been the belief. It's about the dissemination. So people talk about channels. Advertising for a long time has spoken about, where will you place this ad so that you get the most effective kind of response mechanism to it. If you have a choice between online and offline, where will you put this ad? Where will you put this communication? If you have a choice between carrying it in a particular medium like the Times of India, will you put it over there or will you not put it over there? Personally, to me, that's completely irrelevant, because it's not about the communication channel that you're basically going to use, but to me, what is most important is the message. What is it that you're going to deliver? And that message comes about by just understanding who you're communicating to, So I remember when I was very young, and I said I grew up in Mumbai. It was a Saturday morning, and there was a knock on the door, and my mom went to the door and opened it, and there was this gentleman standing outside there who looked, probably she thought he looked fairly civilized, wearing a tie and things like that, and he was standing outside. And she kind of called him into the house because he said he wanted to show, demonstrate something. So he came inside the house, and as people who live in Mumbai know, it tends to be very hot and sultry and stuff like that. So he said, "Ma'am, can I have a glass of water?" And she went to the kitchen to pick up that glass of water, and about 30-35 seconds. In that time, he kind of looked around the living room, and he said, "Decent middle class family, TV in the corner, whatever." And then she came back, and then he said, "So ma'am, what do you do?" And she turned around and told him, "I work in a school." "Oh really? Okay. And what does your husband do?" "Oh, he's a production engineer. He works in a local steel factory kind of thing." So he said, "Okay, interesting. This is interesting." And then he said, "So ma'am, it must be difficult in the morning to get to school on time, because catching that bus, and in Mumbai you have to be ready for the bus or the train or whatever you're kind of catching. It must be difficult to kind of get that bus or the train in the morning." That really hit a chord. And she said, "Yeah, I don't have any domestic help. It's very, because morning I have to get to that bus stop by 7:45. If I'm not there, I miss the bus, school, I'm late for school, whatever." She went into one big story about how that affected her life. And then, he said, "So ma'am, let me tell you, I have the perfect solution for you actually." And he kind of reached down into his bag and he opened that bag. And guess what he took out? Yeah, exactly. It was a Eureka Forbes vacuum cleaner. And in about half an hour, my father, poor fellow, was signing the check, and we bought the thing. Needless to say, of course, we didn't use it more than twice after that. But the point is, I think the point that I'm trying to tell you is that unless you understand that audience, and you're able to hit out at that audience in the right manner, you won't get the correct sale, or you won't get the kind of result that you want to get. So that to me is an important thing. It's not about the medium, it's about the understanding of the audience and getting that message across to the audience in a coherent way. And I think that is what this guy achieved. Because if he had, imagine, taken out this vacuum cleaner and put it out, and before he even engaged in any conversation, he had just said, "Oh, this is this machine, and it runs at so many RPM, and it will consume so much of electricity, and it cleans this and does that." My mother would have lost interest there and then, and she would have said, "No, actually I'm not interested. I have a broom in the corner. It cost me 10 rupees to buy that broom. So I'm not really bothered about this vacuum cleaner or whatever you're calling it." But the point is the way in which it was packaged, presented, after understanding the audience and the pain point in the audience. I think that is what really, today, if I look at a lot of the communication challenges that we are facing, it's about that. People are not able to convey the right message to the right audience. So positioning, there are a lot of, in my view, glorified terms that are used to kind of describe, the value proposition and the positioning and the brand message you want to get on. And there's a lot of jargon around that, and there's enough of material on the net which you can read about it. But in my view, it's really about what is that chord you're going to touch in the consumer's heart if you want to get out of there. And that has to be presented in a manner that is appealing to the consumer. So unless you get that message right, it's not going to kind of make a difference. The question therefore is, how do you tackle multiple audiences and multiple consumers? So I want to open that up to you and ask you, if you had to, here it was a very simple conversation. It was the Eureka Forbes salesman one side, my mother on the other side. He'd sized her up, average middle class woman, and he targeted her and consummated the sale. But if you were to kind of go into multiple audiences that you want to communicate to, and each of them had different kind of needs, how would you kind of target that? How do you think you can kind of target that? If you had to, for example, put up a message on the website, how would you kind of do that so that you appeal to all of them equally, but at the same time are not so generic that it doesn't make an impact on them? So I'm just opening this up because, as I said, I want this to be a conversation rather than just.
So maybe the message could be answering the common pain points of all the segments.
Okay.
So that is one part of it. Or else you fine and refine your segments as much as possible, and then for each segment perhaps there has to be a different, if required, channel or a different messaging for it.
Yeah, correct. So I think that's pretty much it. And one of the things in this whole content creation process is what is called persona identification. So who are the people behind this whole thing? Now, on an average, there's been some research that has been done, and basically what people are saying is that in every organization there are between 5 to 6 people who basically would be the key influencers or decision makers in any process when you're doing a B2B kind of a sale or when you're doing a B2B kind of communication. Okay, and these messages tend to be very, very different for each. I go to a lot of customers today, and one of my questions that I ask them is, who's your audience? And typically the answer that comes very quickly, CXO. They say CXO. So I say CXO, great. Who in CXO? So can you define the X over there? So then they'll kind of elaborate and start saying CIO, CTO, CEO, CFO, and all those. They'll go into all those CMO and all those kind of things. Can you tell me who's your primary audience in this set? Okay. And it is not necessary, one has to remember that the primary audience is the audience who's also the main sponsor of this. So very often in an enterprise, there is one guy who's kind of the sponsor of this whole program. He's a guy who's actually from whose budget the money is going. So sometimes it could be the head of sales from whose budget the money is going. But the actual user of the service could be the marketing head. But the guy to implement the whole service could be the technology head. And finally, the guy who's looking at the hygiene and the efficiency of the whole thing could be the CEO. So there are 4 different kind of stakeholders in this whole enterprise organization, and it has to be kind of tangible for each one of them. I come from a company which used to be called iFlex, which is now Oracle Financial Services. Very interestingly, whenever we went to sell, for example, in a financial institution, say a public sector bank in the country, while there would be a board of people who would constitute that purchase committee, who would kind of decide, evaluate the software, put it through its paces, get everything out, the collateral would be presented, case studies, data sheets, all the rest of it would be done. Ultimately, sometimes the influencer set may not be even sitting in that room. The influencer set could be a DGM or something 2 levels down who could be making the decision. So the challenge for marketing often was, how do I reach that guy? How do I communicate to that guy the value of what we are actually presenting or the value of what we are doing? So very often that had to be communicated completely differently or separately. Maybe it could be addressed through a PR channel as one option. It could be addressed maybe perhaps through some kind of training that needed to be done or some kind of orientation that needed to be done. But I think the important thing in any process that we follow for communication has to be that we identify very comprehensively all these personas. Now, when we identify personas, it's not about saying, okay, so this guy generically does this or does that. The important thing about identifying a persona is actually interviewing the persona, interviewing that person, the role that that person plays, and arriving at a set of things that could be done. I think that becomes an important test to see how the communication would go down with that person. And that becomes important for you to match that with the communication. So ideally, people say that in any organization that you're actually talking to, or any kind of communication that you're developing, you need to talk to at least 5 to 10 people to identify the kind of culture in the organization. What is the pain points that they are facing? What makes them come to work? What motivates them? Why do they think this company is such a great place? Unless you understand some of those factors and put all that together, your communication cannot be kind of addressed to them and the content cannot be delivered in a proper manner. Today, very often I find in my own consulting business, if there are problems with a customer and the customer says, generically, I'm not very happy with what we are doing, or I'm not getting the results of what we are doing, a lot of it can be attributed to the fact that we haven't spent enough of time in identifying who these audience is or who the persona is in the organization. So I think that, in my view, becomes extremely crucial to the whole game. If we are not able to identify the person correctly and what motivates them to kind of consume whatever we are providing them, then we probably lose the plot. The second thing to remember in any kind of a content communication kind of scenario is that you have to estimate the kind of time that it takes between the initial trigger and between the final consummation of the deal, when the check gets signed. In a retail scenario, it becomes easier because often the gratification is immediate. You decide you need to buy a flat screen TV, you go to a shop, you see it, you've already done your research online, you probably looked at mouth shut and discovered which dealer is better, which product is better. It's a fairly easy process. The only thing that can derail the process is that when you actually get out to the shop salesman can turn around and tell you, oh, you've come to buy a Sony TV, actually there's a better deal on a Samsung. And that could derail the process. But that is a last mile thing which probably you don't have control sitting wherever you are sitting. But the same is not true in an enterprise kind of a sale. So when you look at a B2B enterprise kind of a sale, the cycle itself is much longer and is much deeper. And therefore you need to understand what are the trigger points. So today one of our biggest challenges in content development is not about putting out that initial material. So a lot of promotional material goes out initially. You put out a brochure, you put out some website content, you have some social media content and so on. The problem really is in nurturing people from that point onwards till the final sale has been made. For people who go to exhibitions, they'll tell you they come back with a stack of about 100 cards of people they have met at the exhibition. Probably around 12% of those or 15% of those will get fulfilled. But what happens to the balance 85%? In most cases, we forget about the balance 85%. And the reason that the balance 85% is forgotten is because salespeople also work on daily numbers. They don't work on big forecasts that go, for the next 1 month or the next quarter or the next 3 quarters. They're concerned about their targets today and the end of the month. And therefore, what is found in most cases in that kind of a scenario is that they forget about it. And therefore, it becomes the role of marketing and the guys who run content to basically take that content fulfillment to the end. If I keep sending a newsletter, I keep being top of mind. If I keep inviting the prospect to an event, I bring that person top of mind. If I kind of am able to engage with them on social media, then I become top of mind. Now all that requires meaningful content that needs to be developed. And that is where the role of kind of content comes in a bigger way to kind of enable that. Now basically, having said all this, if you look at the environment around us today, the importance of content has got significantly underscored because of various factors. Why do you think it's become so important? I mean, what do you think, if you look at the environment around us, globally as well as in India, what really is driving this whole thing towards content? What could be the drivers?
Aspire to learn more on a specific topic.
Okay.
So if I want to go to a product, it's not only the initial feel and look. So it's like whether that product is getting aligned to my vision, does it really solve the problem? And for that, then most of the time it might go in two ways. One is through the pictures, the video part of it, or through the content part.
Yeah. So research has shown that both in a B2C as well as a B2B environment, about 80% of the sale is done before the person actually steps into the purchase cycle. Because they have done exactly what you're saying. They're looking at material online, offline, whatever. They're looking at whatever they can consume to get something going. What are the other factors you think that has led to this whole importance of content?
There are more enablers for the people to consume the content, like mobile,
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you really look at it, for example, the number of mobile phones in the country today has exceeded 1 billion, okay, and of which about 40% I think are smartphones where easy transactions can be done and so on and so forth. So that has been one entire thing. It has led to this whole app movement which has kind of become, extremely convenient for people to kind of consume content, to decide on things that they need to do. So ordering food can be done online, ordering a taxi can be done online, everything is kind of that. But the question is also then the issue of reputation becomes important. So while both Uber and Ola provide 4 wheels and a place to sit down, what's the difference between one and the other? Is there a perception in people's mind about one being better than the other? That kind of stuff. So that becomes a kind of an important consideration.
The topic of that competition, that is also driving the kind of content and the proliferation of the content into the, for example, newsprint. The first page ad is, especially in the Sunday Times, is taken by either Flipkart or a Snapdeal, and they are almost vying for each other's time on that space.
Correct.
So I think the competition is driving all these companies also a little bit nuts to go aggressive in driving content.
Absolutely, and if you look at the kind of quality of the kind of communication as well, it's not just communication which is basically just visual communication. A lot of it is explanatory communication, which also links people into other properties where they can get more information. Which is why 80% of the deal is done before actually, the guy steps into or makes the phone call or steps into the shop or does whatever he has to. So I think that becomes more important in terms of what needs to be done. The other fact,
actually also mobile devices and the video content now with a lot of people using YouTube as a big source of information and news. Not only I saw, like, as part of my company's sales training, they were taught to actually how to research the customer by using YouTube as a key resource, where they look at what is the company strategy, how to look at the key executives, what they talk in YouTube, and then take that and actually tailor the message or the challenges they are facing. So even for sellers, the research is being a lot of research could be done before they actually talk to the customer.
Absolutely, and actually that percolates down not just at an enterprise level, but it percolates down even to an individual level. Today a lot of research is done on people who come for interviews, as an example. So I look at everybody's LinkedIn profile before I actually meet them. Before I actually go to a customer, I look at the LinkedIn profile. I sometimes try to look at the Facebook profile as well, because I get some interesting insight into what the customer's behavior patterns could be. What were they doing last night, or what were they doing, what are the games they engage in. These are all good conversation starters when you're actually kind of, engaging with somebody. So I think with the proliferation of social media and the opening of social media, the proliferation of devices, content has kind of taken a center stage, which is why today there's a big rush for content. The challenge, however, is a few things. When you're kind of rushing into developing content, there are a few things that I find, and there are about 5 things I want to highlight as to what are typical concerns that people have for this development of content. Okay. The first thing that I often kind of come across is, how do you ensure that the content is authentic? Okay, credible. So
now the same question, the same aspect, we see Glassdoor. Glassdoor gives you reviews of various companies and their salary or whatever about the company.
Correct.
But there will be always negative as well as some positive. How do you judge, coming to the point that you were also highlighting, how do you judge on which is the right content. Because you never know, because what I learned is also many large companies, you have negative comments coming from the users who have quit the company, but to create a positive content, companies engage in creating a positive content into that social media. But how do you judge? On what basis you judge? Do you have any suggestion?
So the thing is, it's an old PR secret. Okay, I mean, when I started my PR career, if there was a negative piece of news going out in the media, quickly there would be a discussion internally in the conference room. What's the next positive thing that we can say? Okay, and that would be the kind of next press release that would go out. Oh, we won this fantastic order in US or something, to kind of counter that negative piece, because public memory is short. But today, the only way you can really judge a company is by really looking at multiple media sources and making an impression for yourself. I can tell you personally, in the case of my own company, we've had a couple of people who've not quit, with the right spirit. Negative comments on Glassdoor. And the other thing that you will notice as behavior yourself is that any negative news spreads 10 times faster than positive news. People who have quit in a good frame of mind never put a comment on Glassdoor. Okay, they just quit, they go, they are very happy, you're happy, they're happy, everybody shakes hands, and that's the end of this relationship. That is where the difference is. So the only way you can judge a company is by really not just basing your opinion on one channel, but really looking at it in a more holistic way. That's the only way you can judge. The second thing is, if you want to go a little deeper into this whole thing, is to really look at the kind of the way in which the material has been presented. People often, when they're angry about something or they're not in a positive frame of mind, they tend to get personal in their accusations. They tend to kind of, put in a few things which are not professional. You immediately know that this is not something which is being written in a balanced thing. And that's basically how you kind of have to judge one or the other. There have been people, for example, on certain platforms, like my daughter is a chef, and she tells me she keeps monitoring the movement on Zomato. So she says and she knows what's happening in the kitchen as well, because they're serving the dishes outside. She says that in some cases there are people who make unrealistic demands, okay, for something or the other. They complain, oh, this is not good, that is not good, and sure enough you get a 2 rating or a 3 rating there. She says it directly translates, but she says nobody is listening to our side of the story, and saying that this is an unrealistic demand that was being made and I couldn't satisfy the demand. We apologize to the customer. In some cases we reduce the bill by 50%. That doesn't get reflected. The customer just comes out and says, I asked for something, it didn't happen, this was not good, and whatever. So it has to be a kind of a balanced. You got to read a little more deeper into what is being said and then kind of come out with that. That's the only way in which you can tackle it. My advice would be, don't tackle it by trying to put 20 positive posts after that. That also becomes artificial, and people can see through that. So anybody who's kind of intelligent enough will be able to see through the whole thing and kind of decide that this is not kind of the way to go. So that becomes absolutely kind of transparent to anybody outside. The other thing that becomes very important in this whole thing is that this whole aspect about measurement. How do I measure what I'm getting for the content that I'm putting out? And that's a question consultants like us get asked. So you're going to be charging us X amount of dollars to kind of do this work. What will I get out of it? What is the ROI? What is the benefit that I get out of this whole thing? And I think that has to kind of come out from various parameters. It cannot be linked solely or directly only to the revenue, but it also has to be linked to the brand. So if you really look at content that is getting developed or the marketing program that is being done, it has to be kind of broken into 2 parts. One part of it is the entire thing relating to brand. Okay, what is that intangible value that is getting created for the product or service that you're offering? And the second part of it has to be, what is the value you're creating for a direct lead that you're getting into the bucket? So we put a variety of parameters on the table. So we talk about followers, we talk about, and there are some which are numerically measurable. I started out with 200 followers, I'm now at 20,000 followers. So that's a numerical measurement. But to me personally, that doesn't mean much. It's like saying that, you know, in the PR engagement, I was to deliver so many centimeters of, you know, coverage for you, or so many stories for you, and I delivered those stories. The point is, whether the story is positive, negative, what is the impression it left in the mind of the audience? And that's a similar thing here too. You can have a lot of followers. In fact, somebody was telling me the other day that most of the followers of, say, an Audi, for example, are not even eligible to drive the car. Okay, they're not even old enough to drive the car. It's just a cult value that gets created. So that doesn't mean anything to finally the buying process. Okay, because they're not going to be able to buy the car. Leave alone the fact that most people may not be able to afford the car, which is a separate story altogether. So that is just a perception that gets created in the market. But the other thing that needs to get created in the market is the actual perception that needs to be good about the thing, and the actual what you're getting in terms of value. So it's not a numerical value in my view. What we measure also is engagement. How much of engagement is there? For every post that we put out or every piece of content that we deliver, how many people come back and comment on that? That needs to be seen. How many people are sharing that because they found it valuable? How many people like it? You know, so just a couple of days back, there was this interesting advertisement that was, it was a piece of advertisement from The Economist. I don't know whether you saw that. It just said Donald Trump. Did you see that? It just said Donald Trump. And somebody highlighted the D-O-N of Donald and the T of Trump. So it really read don't. Okay. And that like kind of, so I saw it, I shared it. And after that about 20 people shared it. Okay, because it had some kind of resonance with somebody. There was a message that they saw which was valuable. Very simple piece of communication. And somebody commented, if all good communication or content could be like this, what a great impact it will have on all of us. Okay, no complex message, nothing. It was just the name with the 3-4 alphabets highlighted. Okay, just an interesting way of putting things across. So the point is, in the measurement, how much of it is really about perception that is getting created, rather than just saying I went from 2,000 to 20,000, or I went from 5 to 100, or whatever it is. That in my mind doesn't make too much of sense. That really doesn't kind of talk about anything that we need to achieve, because ultimately it doesn't mean it gets connected back into the actual. The third thing that I think becomes very important in the content creation process is to think about the content repurposing and how you're going to kind of deliver the content to people in different form factors. Okay, so becomes a factor of that persona creation that I spoke about. If you don't understand who the people are out there, then you will not understand how to disseminate the content. And when you're talking of content and content marketing, you're talking of content at 3 or 4 different levels. One of it is just text-based content that is going out. The other of it, as you said, could be things like videos, which today have a much better kind of an appeal with people. The third thing could be infographics, for example. Available on different channels as well, because communication today is not about a single channel, it's about multiple channels. People are reading socially, they are reading it in the newspaper, so there's a PR channel, they are reading it probably as an email which comes in, and so on and so forth. So that becomes an important kind of a way of managing and measuring how your content actually goes out. What are the various form factors that will take, and how is the consumption of those form factors done? So I think that becomes an important, significantly important kind of a thing. So I think the final point on this whole content development and creation process is the whole thing about the management of reputation. And as I said, that is about quick response time that needs to go out. Recently we bought something on an Amazon, where we bought a glass bowl or something. And the first day my wife stuck it into the microwave, it broke. So she took it out and she took a photograph of it and she put it up on Facebook and tagged the company in it and said, what do I do with this now? I mean, it's kind of broken and things like that. And this was about 10:30 in the night. And in a very short while, the company guy, in the night at 11 o'clock said, don't worry, just give us the reference number. You can, kind of message me the reference number of the purchase and we'll sort it out. By the next morning, he had actually communicated back again and said, we've noted the reference number, we'll send you a fresh piece again. That's a kind of response. So, very meaningful interaction, finding out what the problem is and addressing that. Versus a time I actually had a flight, flew in a particular airline, very dissatisfied with what was happening, and I put a comment out. I got a nice piece of English coming back to me. So content is not good English. Yeah, English is important, but it's not about good English. I had that experience with a delivery service for groceries, for example. Nice piece of English. So they were to deliver between 7 and 8 o'clock in the night or 9 o'clock in the night. It happened to be part of my dinner. It didn't come at 9 o'clock. I called up the call center, found out what was happening. They were unable to tell me that. Finally, I just had to go and make some other provision. Again, nice piece of English. We know you're upset with us. We are sorry this happened. It won't happen again. All this kind of stuff. On an empty stomach at 9 o'clock in the night, it's not funny. Okay? And that is what people miss. You hear this time and again. Scripts that are developed for call centers. Somebody is calling, and a colleague of mine got a call a few months back about some insurance policy, which was in the name of her father. And she said, yeah, unfortunately he passed away, a few months back. The next question is, okay, so who else can I talk to? As blunt as that. And these are leading brands in the market. Okay? Because it's a very clear thing. There's been decision diagram there. If yes, this. If no, this. Next question. So who else can I talk to? And I mean, she was outraged. She put it on Facebook again, and it became one big issue. But I'm just saying that is what we kind of miss in the whole process. So we write content that we basically put out it sounds very good. It's written by a marketing person, a creative person. But that is not what the customer wants to hear in those circumstances. So how much of research can we do to find out what are the typical customer problems that exist, and what would be the solution that we can offer to them from a content perspective? So just to kind of bring everything back into one track, content is not about sitting down and writing a piece and putting it out and saying that, okay, this is what I get out of it, or this is what I'm hoping out of this. I think content is a much more scientific process. It involves multiple things. The first thing I think it involves is identifying who that audience is at a broad generic level. But after you've identified the audience at a broad generic level, it involves breaking it down by doing some research and identifying who are those personas, what are their behaviors, what are their age groups, what do they like, what do they dislike, and understanding therefore what your core value proposition will be in this process. So what is it that you want to deliver to them? Matching that value proposition with the overall brand values of the company, and then articulating that in two forms. One is deciding on the channels of communication based on that persona analysis. So should I kind of, just do text, should I do video, should I do whatever? And then deciding basically what are the best channels that it will be. So shall I put it into a YouTube, or should I put it social, or should I completely kind of just not ignore social? I was talking to a bunch of entrepreneurs the other day, and there was a guy who basically has got an application that is meant for schools. It's meant to monitor children in schools. So I went to the website, and there was the overall thing which said 50 rupees per child. Okay, that's the kind of price point that he's arrived at. And that was very prominently displayed on the website, along with a whole bunch of features saying your child's movement in school, the reports card, attendance, right down to tracking GPS in the bus. So it will alert you when the child is on the way home, etc., etc. Variety of very nice features, very well kind of thing. And his question in this mentoring workshop was, so what is what social media channel do I use? So my question was to him, I don't think social media is relevant at all in this case as a primary channel. Who are you selling to ultimately? So he said, I'm selling to principals of schools. So I said, on your website, the message itself is wrong because I'm seeing 50 rupees per child. So actually, I was under the impression that I can pay you 50 rupees and you'll monitor my child for me. So then he says, no, that's not the intention. The intention is I go to a school and the school has 800 kids, and so then I charge 40,000 rupees because 800 into 50, and I charge 40,000 rupees to the school as a corporate package. Oh, that was not coming out on the website, you know. So I said, your website was, no, but I was trying to show how economical it is. I said, yeah, but your audience is completely mismatched because I thought I am the audience as an individual and I can just pay 50 rupees and get something out of it. The next question after this whole thing was basically, you know, how do I kind of reach out on the channel? And the channel was, social to me is completely irrelevant. If you want to get to schools, it's got to be feet on the street. You've got to kind of reach out to principals. You've got to kind of reach out to managements. Unless you kind of get there and talk to them and convince them, they're not going to be allow you to kind of implement this. Also understand how it's going to get paid for. So is the school going to pay it, or the school is just going to pass it on to the parents? Are the parents going to have a say in this at all? Or they're not going to have a say? You need to check that out also. Otherwise, you're marketing something which ultimately may not succeed because parents may say, I don't want my child monitored or something to that effect. And then how are you going to reach out to tier 2, tier 3 cities and all over the place? Because he talked about that as well. So it's not about saying, oh, everybody's using social, so I will use social also. It's about saying that social is a good channel, provided my audience is sitting there and is doing something about that, and it's going to react to that. If they're not going to do that, then to me it's a completely meaningless exercise. So I think that becomes an important part of the whole thing. So it's about the planning, it's about the channel, it's about the message, it's about the value proposition, and then it's about developing the content. So content comes after all that. And again today, my thing to you is, if you're an entrepreneur or if you're a marketing head or you're managing a company or whatever you're doing, that part of the content can actually be developed by a lot of specialists. You don't need to sit and write the content on your own. There's a lot of specialists who can actually come and help in the content development process. Today, most companies fail in their content efforts because people are not able to share their expertise. Give an engineer a piece of paper or a laptop to write something, he'll run away. He doesn't want to write. But he has a wealth of knowledge in his head. How can you pull that out? What is the mechanism you can use? So we of course specialize in doing some of that, where we can actually sit with the guy. We have questionnaires that we administer. Nobody fills in a questionnaire, by the way. But we sit there and we kind of go through the questions, they answer the questions, we structure the content based on that. And then we kind of put it out. But the fact of the matter is that you can't ignore the need for good content, fresh content that needs to be kind of put up on your channels every day. So just to kind of summarize, the way I look at it in the marketing process is that the website and content remains the foundation of everything that you do. That is the catchment area, that's like the lake into which everything pours in. On top of that, you have your dissemination channels that you use to get out. Email, PR, social media and all those kind of things. And then on top of that, a typical layer that is there is the layer of events, where you get to meet people, you talk to people, you engage, you collect cards, that you can filter back into that pit or that layer of content which is sitting on your website. So the way we go about it is actually having a campaign approach that we take to the whole thing. How can I reach out to my audience such that they come back to my website, they get convinced about the product, and then they buy? That's really the thing that we apply. And we apply this both to the B2B space as well as the B2C space. And we get results out of it. So we measure the results that we do. We have a couple of customers, one of whom is a player in the risk compliance space, who gets about 43% of leads just through the website and through the channels that go out. So the good content that's on the website, just consume that and just kind of take that out. That's basically what comes out of it. There's another customer we use who's not far from here, Electronic City, who last year got a revenue of about 4.5 crores just through content that went out through the website. because people come back, they get convinced, they talk, then the sales process takes over to fulfillment. So that's the typical kind of thing that you see. So that's really about the importance of content and why it is to kind of recognize and realize that content is important and how to kind of put it out onto the various channels. So I'm happy to kind of take any questions that you may have, any issues that, yeah.
So with the negative content what we discussed earlier in the class, we spoke about this technology adoption life cycle, and there was an example of Google as well.
Yeah.
Few of the early adopters, if they were not convinced, they can anytime go ahead and post negative comments. But that side of the activity, we cannot manage it. So
You can't.
It's up to the users. So anytime they can go ahead and do a negative comment, create negative content. So our companies handling that situation, like,
The only way you can handle a situation, to be frank with you, is by the reputation that you have in the market. And that comes from the service that you provide. It's as simple as that. It's managing that. You can't suppress anything today. And it's about just managing the perception in the market. You know, I'll give you a simple example. When we used to go through one cost cutting phase, typically, these guys will tell you that we'll go by the cheapest airlines. So earlier, when you're working in any of these IT companies, they'll give you a choice of airlines. So you say, I'm going to the US, okay, I'd fly British Airways or whatever it is. So suddenly these guys will, and no offense to any of these brands, I'm just talking about some of these brands, they'll turn around and say, okay, Air India. So I had this senior guy who walked into my room and he said, hey, can you do something, man? They booked me on Air India, the flight will be late, I will reach late, all that negative stuff around that. So I said, see boss, there's nothing I can do, this is a company policy, I can't go and upturn the policy and say you can't fly and now I will put you on another flight and all that kind of thing. I think you go. 2 weeks later he came back from the US, he was absolutely delighted here. So he said, best service I got, Dreamliner aircraft, nice Indian food, on time departure, direct flight, like it was like Bombay to New York directly, there was no stop in between, etc., etc. He gave me all the virtues. So I said, what was your problem then? Why were you cribbing, I want to change to some other airline? Because that is in his head, the perception is there. And that perception has come from experience. And that experience has come because somewhere in the past when he has flown, the flight has been late, maybe the ground staff were rude, maybe on board he had some bad experience. But the counter question to that is, are you telling me that Indigo, Jet, British Airways, all these guys don't have that problem? Of course they have the problem. But it's just that they try to manage the perception in a way that ultimately the customer is satisfied. I went to the US a few months back. We had a terrible experience. My wife had a bad case of food poisoning. I had to actually rush her to the hospital on arrival over there. And British Airways washed their hands off. The mail that they wrote to me, I can show it to you. Oh, we have the best service. We are reputed by something, and they are quoting some statistics. I don't care about your statistics. And today give me a choice, I won't fly probably by that airline. But it's about individual perception that becomes a collective thing that then kind of goes forward. The only way to manage, to me, social media is the last mile. Manage your staff, manage your internal communications, manage how your people deal with your customers. Then you see the kind of outcome at the other end. And very often, the people who are dealing are the people who are at the transaction level. So typically an admin person in a company will be rude internally. An HR person will say something. The staff at the desk will say something. That aggregates and leads to a negative perception going forward. That's all. Nothing more than that. Sorry.
For example, there are e-commerce websites like Flipkart or Amazon. Now, these websites, their homepage is very important to us. What content to place in their homepage? So, what goes in while strategizing, like what content to place? Because that is their showcase. So, they have got millions.
That is completely based on analytics, because it's completely based. It's based on two things. One is what are people consuming, and therefore what will drive sales. And that goes down to, so Flipkart and Amazon and all spend a ton of money to understand what people are consuming, where they are consuming these things, so in which part of the country. So for example, if there is something being consumed in a particular part of the country, they'll probably tune their communication to that. For example, why are some ads in a local language and not in English? because they're tuning them to that. They know that that is from where their sales come. That is their cash cow for them. That's one factor. The second factor that is important for these Flipkart is what they want to promote. So sometimes there will be a guy who's actually got his products that he's selling there. So I'm from Himalaya, I'm selling beauty products, and I want those beauty products to be showcased for a period of time because it's linked to it's a wedding season or something. So therefore I will go and say that, can you kind of showcase this? I might pay a premium for that to get it showcased on the front page. But most of the reasons why people stock things in a particular way is purely because of the analytics of what people are buying. Right down to your retail stores. For example, when you walk into a Shoppers Stop, there are certain things which are displayed right in the front over there. Why? Because that is what the trend is, that is what people are buying. Therefore you want the consumer to buy that quickly. How do people decide about combination of goods? If I'm buying, bread, I give you jam free, whatever, something like that. Why? How do they decide that? They do a market basket analysis and then decide that that is what it is. So it's completely a factor of consumption patterns that people are deciding.
There's also a lot of testing that happens, like A/B testing and all, where you place a content and then you monitor response of that particular content. So what is the structured way of doing it?
See, the structured way of doing it is, as I said, the first thing you need to do is identify who your consumer is, who those personas are, who are the guys who are buying your product. That's the first thing. The second thing is, which was a traditional way of doing it and which used to happen earlier with a lot of agencies, is they will actually commission a survey. So that's how the IMRBs of the world and others, were doing. That was one part of their business. Today what's happening is, because everything is in a hurry to kind of launch, everybody wants to go out fast, what they're doing is they're commissioning some of these things on the social channels. So I will do a dipstick on Facebook, for example. We are handling currently a brand which is a jeans brand, okay? It's not a well-known jeans brand, but the guy has got certain key values that he wants to bring to the market. The material that he's using and the fact that the entire pair of jeans is custom made. So he's currently got a physical footprint in Delhi, and the rest of the country you send him your measurements. So he says, depending on the curve of your body and the curve of your whatever, he will stitch your jeans accordingly. So it's absolutely custom fit jeans. It's not something you buy in the store and then you can't even do alteration properly if you need to. That's his value proposition. So what we did when we started the assignment is, we said, you've sold to X number of customers. Let's take a dipstick from that and talk to them. So we actually went to those 20, 25 kind of customers which are a dipstick of that, and we tried to understand what are their habits. We came across some interesting stuff. Like, for example, when I travel abroad, these are all, because this guy's jeans are priced also at 4,000 and 5,000 rupees. So it's not something you'll buy for daily wear kind of thing. So when we kind of did that research, we found that guys who go abroad buy a really designer pair of jeans for 15,000 or 20,000 rupees. They bring that back, okay, and then they buy 5 of these jeans to fit that measurement. That's the kind of thing. So, and they believe that this is it. So, and they're very niche players. They're not people who will kind of go out and so if you look at their wardrobe, you find there'll be 5 of this brand, there'll be 1 of that designer brand, and then they may have 2 Levi's and 3 Wranglers or whatever it is, that kind of thing. Now when we got this whole insight into the research, then we realized that look, the way we target also has to be very customized and has to be done in a particular manner. So the whole communication exercise now, from being mass based, has shifted to being individual based. The properties we target, for example, when you go and advertise on a Facebook, you advertise with that demographics in mind and say only serve up this ad to those kind of people who have this profile, therefore optimizing the kind of spend that you do. So that's basically what you need to do. So when you're doing a strategy, the best way to do it is take a dipstick of your audience, decide what you want to do there with them, what they are aspiring from the brand, and then address it. Yeah.
So I have a connecting point regarding the previous comment on the negative comments about some service or some product, right?
Yeah.
So you told the one way to fight this is to kind of overcome is only with the quality of the service you provide. You don't provide some counter positive statements and all those things.
Correct.
So but then for me to even even consume the service. I mean, the negative comments would be the barrier for me to even go and use the service and experience it myself. Right,
No,
so if
but-
I,
yeah.
so they should, so content management cannot answer me there, right? So
Content management cannot answer you there, but the point is that once people have experienced a superlative service at the end, there will be a few people who will also write positive reviews. Go to a TripAdvisor, for example. Okay, look at the reviews that people have on hotels. So there are some hotels which have mastered the brand of pampering the customer, and not pampering necessarily, but looking after them, meeting the expectation. So you will find on a scale of 5, most of the ratings are excellent, good, whatever it is. There are some hotels which will have mixed ratings. Those are the confusing ones.
so I think, yeah, so what Nyana was asking was particularly on the similar line, I guess. So when I now evaluate it based on individual ratings versus overall ratings, it's like all averages out, and then I am kind of indecisive to make a decision
Indecisive,
whether
but
it's good or
finally-
bad. And
yeah, but finally, if you make a decision in that favor, you may decide based on some of the positive comments that could be there, and then there will be other extraneous factors that you're also looking at, like price point and all the rest of it. So that's basically how it is. And human nature, if you look at it, is finally you base your whole conclusion on, you may ask somebody personally, oh, what do you think of this place, or what do you think? My only thing is, when you have responses, see, if you're looking at a response that needs to be developed, and you look at, again I say, go to a TripAdvisor, go to any of these things. One guy is complaining, my room was smelling, my bed was bad, my breakfast was cold, whatever he is putting on. What are the typical response the restaurant, the hotel gives to that? Typical response is, we are sorry for this experience, we will do our best next time, we hope you will stay with us. You will get those standard lines. What additional value is that adding to you?
So it depends. I mean, if it is something when if I am going to make a one purchase or a repeated purchase of the similar service or a product. So if it is like a one-time purchase, perhaps I may want to take the external views and I may get connected with my friends and take their reviews and all. But then say something like if I want to order some food from some restaurant using this Swiggy application or something, right? So I may just look at the ratings and the comments of certain restaurant on certain dishes or whatever, and then I may make my own perception and then go ahead with that decision, rather than kind of talking to the friends and who use it.
And what happens is, when there's a gratification, so for example, I told you about that microwave glass which broke, and within 3 days the guys had delivered a fresh piece. I mean, my wife put a comment on Facebook saying, super responsive service. We are very happy with this, and I mean, the company was based in Baroda or somewhere. Didn't even expect them to respond. It was no big deal, but that is what you do.
One of my friend, he's actually very active on social media, and whenever something bad happens, he'll immediately put on social media. And actually, this company people, they are listening. They do something, and then he says, okay, they did something. Then I tell him, I had to tell him that because they have rectified your problem, now you have to go and post it that the problem has been rectified. So that negative thing is actually there, like 10:1, what you said, it is correct actually.
Yeah. See, I had a problem with Godrej. I went to the supermarket, I bought some of the frozen products. Okay. When I came back home, I opened the packet. Everything was in shambles here. It was all this thing. So I took a photograph of that, I put it on Facebook, and I said the product should be renamed into, whatever. It was more like keema than, the full piece of all these things, and I put it up. Within 5 minutes, I got somebody from Godrej Corporate Communications in Bombay wrote up and said, hey, we are sorry for this. It was late in the evening. It was about 9 o'clock in the evening. I'll get my area sales manager to contact you tomorrow morning. Next day, area sales manager comes to my house with 5 different products and says, sir, we are sorry, try this. Actually, to be fair to you, it's not the problem with the product. It's a problem with the storage. Because the particular department store has stored it, and power cuts, they have not taken care of that. Probably the product is kind of thing. Came with the explanation next day with 5 different products to me. I was compelled to put a comment back again on the media and say, look, these guys sorted my problem out. And then everybody said, great, good, thumbs up to Godrej, whatever. So it's all about that, how you tackle the problem. And I'm saying you have to tackle the problem in a real world situation. I mean, tomorrow if I tell you something and you counter me back, you're not using a scripted, nice English way of countering me. You're telling me something, I tell you something, we have a conversation. That is what companies today have not mastered in terms of the content, because they can't customize the content into one particular way or the other. That is where the problem is.
Yeah, I work for a like organization which typically doesn't believe in the like social media and all those things. They're more relying on the print media and other thing. But problem there is when you release a press note and what actually gets printed, that's a totally different thing. Like I will give you an example. Last year we had a conference of highly high level scientists who were working on the protein quality. And when the press release went out and it got printed, they related it to the PDS actually. The issue was with the international food standards, and then the press guys, they related it to the Indian scenario actually. So is there some standard way to actually tackle these guys so that when you release something, they don't distort it actually? Is there a standard way to...
See, the strategy that I have followed in my communications career has been to nurture and develop a few media people who will try to understand what your product or service is, particularly as it gets more technical or complex. You can't use a mass-based approach to deal with the media. So one of the things we used to do, for example, is expose them to demos. We used to give them analyst reports once in a while, so which they could read. I even took 4 journalists to Geneva to an international banking exhibition so that they could actually see what the banking environment globally was, because they are sitting in India, in Bangalore or in Bombay or Hyderabad or whatever and writing about some global environment. They don't even understand. They haven't traveled there to see what that was about. Of course, that met with a lot of resistance from the management, because they said, suppose they go and meet the competition. I said, well, so be it. Let them go and talk to the competition, talk to anybody. But the only way you can do this is by actually identifying 3 to 4 people who could be friends of your company and nurturing them, giving them so don't interact with them only when you want news published, but interact with them on a regular basis so that they are able to kind of appreciate what your company is doing. The other thing which we all forget is that we only want to interact with them about our products and services. Talk to them a little bit, about what is happening in the environment around. Okay, what is competition doing? Sometimes even tell them, why don't you go and talk to the competition as well? Maybe they're doing something which is little different from what is happening here. Unless you build that nurturing environment, you will always, you give a press release out on something that's highly technical, people won't understand, it will just go into they will write what they want and misinterpret it, and that is where you'll have a problem.
Yeah, just this actually on blogging. So our company has got a blog where product managers, marketing managers write blogs, and I don't see a lot of activity there. What actually is the purpose in a B2B environment for technology blogs to be created in company sites, and what use it can be for actually the company? What is the potential for those?
So there are 3 things. One thing is basically when you have a blogging strategy and you're writing blogs, you could be doing it just purely for SEO purposes, to get as much traction back onto Google. Keywords are inserted and things like that. The second reason you could be doing it is because you want to create thought leadership. So for example, I was talking to a retail analytics customer. They got a retail analytics product the other day, and they were telling me that some customer, or not customer, but somebody in the market has shifted to an omni-channel strategy for a certain reason. So I said, why don't you provide an opinion on that? Because you will be the first to provide an opinion. Okay? So it's thought leadership. I am trying to drive a certain market direction into the whole thing. The third reason why people have a blogging strategy is because they want to build personalities. Okay? And they want to cultivate one person in the company to become, the kind of face of the company. We need a human face of the company. So that could be a third way in which they want to drive it. But my view is that the second way, this whole thing about creating thought leadership, is the most valuable way in which you can drive things. It doesn't give you immediate results, but it results in a good amount of traction over a period of time. And people start to recognize that, this is, it's important for them to, then they kind of follow you. It also has a ripple effect on the offline media thing, because there's research to say that almost 75% of journalists who go to a media interview study online activity before they go there. a lot of their questions could come out of the blogs that you're actually developing. So it has a spin-off effect there as well.
How do you manage or spend the marketing development funds on the content creation?
How do you mean?
So, do you fund for a user group activity to get the content from the users? Do you fund for a roadshow of the product what you are working? So, because for the content there has to be sources. So, how do you manage those sources with the funds? What you will get allocated?
In my opinion, the best way to kind of get the best return on what you are spending has to be to develop sources internal to your organization, because they are the people who are closest to the product and understand the product the best. User groups are important. If you can get, for example, customer case studies or information from customers who can kind of, give you that information, nothing like it. That is a good channel to kind of to engage. But I don't think customers need to be paid to kind of.
So, in simple, like, is it the content marketing that initiates user group conference?
Yes,
they get involved in the roadshow activity. Do they fund internally for those activities?
Yeah, normally within marketing, okay, content will be one part of that whole marketing exercise, the whole content marketing game. That there will be a specific budget to kind of fund roadshows, fund speaker opportunities, fund case studies, fund the website, fund the social media activity, digital marketing activities. All that will be done through that. So that's how the budget gets created in terms of how much you want. So as I told you, there were the 3 layers. There's the website, which is the bottom layer. There's the events and the PR. That's really the stack of. Normally in a tech company, those are the three things that will operate. Anything else?
Those were the days when the ad writers and the copywriters used to have a very creative skill that they used to learn and nurture and nourish. Now, do they have to learn new ways of doing that because of all the new ways of not only customer sensitive, customer contextual understanding that they have to go beyond the print media, now also the social media?
Correct.
What have they have to learn since those days?
So first they have to unlearn, because they have to go the other direction, and just writing good copy, for example, may not be. See, it depends on the kind of brand, and if you look at B2C kind of engagement, copywriting still plays an important role, because in a very crisp and pithy manner you want to kind of convey things. It could be visual, it could be whatever. The question is that today in a lot of agencies, we approach the problem by talking of offline advertising and then chucking the campaign over to online and saying, can you kind of adapt this? In my view, that's the wrong way of doing it. Online has to be given its separate path. The brief of who the customer is, what we are trying to do, etc., can be kind of communicated to both offline and online, but each one can develop their strategy independently. Okay, that's one point. The second thing is that as communication kind of becomes more evolved, like if you're talking of B2B communication and you're selling enterprise level products, more complex products and stuff like that, then thought leadership and long format content plays a more important role, because then you're addressing an audience which is expecting to hear more things and to kind of be convinced, because the cycle to buying is longer as well. You have to nurture the audience through that cycle. So therefore then in my view, a copywriter kind of a thing doesn't even come into play, because it's more like a content developer or a part technical writer that has to kind of develop the content. That's where it is. And especially if you're dealing, like for example in the kind of products he was talking about, where it's a complex kind of thing. You might even need, like today in my company we have demands for people who can write on manufacturing, who can write. So we have somebody who wants a blog on avionics and aviation. I mean, I can't as a humanities graduate sit there and write something. So I'm actually talking to an aviation specialist who can kind of understand trends and write, because the audience is VP of engineering in Boeing. So it has to tackle that, it has to go there. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. This was very topical because these are all the things that we've been going over in terms of